Trinidad Bhojpuri words and phrases. I'm here at the beautiful Manzanilla beach. So, here's a look at last week's words. In this episode, कैसे बोले ague fever हिंदुस्तानी में, JANWAAS, GHANGREE-ANGREE भुइयां में GHISRAALAA, OJHAA and NARAM ROTI. So this is the star.
Right, they're doing it like this, right? I'm mashing it up so.
Hello, I'm Karen Das.
I'm Vinay Harrichan from the Cutlass magazine.
Well, we had another active week on Facebook, social media, even on the radio show as well. Nice conversation going. So let's kick off with our Kaise Bole segment. So Kaise Bole Hindustani mein, how do you say it in Hindustani? So we went with a fever, and not just any fever, ague fever. I remember growing up hearing inside fever. So you didn't have a cold, it wasn't just a flu or virus, it was just this fever, and you just get these horrible chills. So you'd start shaking, and somehow the older folks just knew that you had ague fever. So we wanted to know the Hindustani word for that particular fever. And we had jaraya, we had jharaya, we had jiraya. What was your feedback?
Yes, so we tested Kaise Bole Hindustani mein or Kaise Bole ague fever Hindustani mein, and a lot of people gave us the answer jaraya, and that was the answer that we were looking for. Jaraya, jiraya. Some people gave us an aspirated spelling, jharaya. I think that could have just been, people trying to spell it to the best of their abilities, because as far as we're aware, the word jaraya comes without the aspirated H in the beginning. So jaraya is the Hindustani word for ague fever, and as you mentioned, it has that specific context of a fever that involves having almost uncontrollable chills and feeling very cold. And typically in the context of ague fever, we know that it happens very suddenly. I remember my mom would say, if she wasn't covering with a blanket and she got very cold, she'd say she was catching jaraya. And, she needed a chadar to pull the sheet and stuff like that. So jaraya is what we found to be the Hindustani word for ague fever. And I thought it was very interesting that I did notice some Surinamese and Fijian people where they still speak the language, noting that they didn't have a specific word for that ague fever, and many said with bukar or bukara. And just to note, bukar is the standard word for fever. Jaraya is the word for that fever where you get those chills and that feeling of coldness.
So on that note of jaraya, do we know the root word? Do we know the etymology of the word jaraya?
Yeah, so some people might think that it comes from jarawe, which is the Hindustani word to set something on fire or to set it aflame. However, it comes from a very old Bhojpuri word, jara, and jara is the Hindustani word or Bhojpuri word for cold. So as we mentioned, jaraya is not just a fever, it's a fever specifically with those cold chills. So the etymology being that word of jara, being cool.
I was really happy though to receive all those messages, all the comments and the text messages. And this was another one that many people were really happy to share with us, because there were memories of growing up. So they would hear the word being used. So jaraya was our Trinidad Bhojpuri word for ague fever. So thank you for your participation. We moved on to JANWAAS. And JANWAAS, not a person, not a thing, but a place for for specific people.
Yes, exactly. And so Janwas is essentially like the holding area or the waiting room for once the Dulaha arrives at his wedding. And as we know, in a Hindu wedding, the Dulaha goes to the bride's house, the Dulahin's house, and that's where the wedding happens. So when all the Baratians or the people in the Bharat arrive from the groom's side or the Dulaha side, they need a place to stay for a little bit and wait. So that's the Janwas. So as you know, in a Hindu wedding, when both sides of the family meet, the both fathers of the Dulaha and Dulahin meet, and they exchange their, their malas, their flower garlands, and their gifts. Then the Dulaha and his family have to go wait, and so the Saibala, the Dulaha, and his family wait in the Janwas. And when you think about, well, why would there be a waiting area or storage area? As many people remember, back in the day, they had a night wedding, and so think about people traveling for many days in the night. They arrive at the wedding. They don't just have the wedding from the moment that they arrive. They have to have a place where they go and they rest. They get ready for the wedding. They maybe change their clothes, all of that. And so the Janwas was where all of that would happen. That's where all the people from the men's side of the family would go. And in long-time days, they would have singing and dancing and, little theater performances and stuff there.
To keep them entertained, so they'll wait through the night. So
Yeah.
it was like a hospitality zone, like a lounge area.
Yeah. Yeah.
And is that where the puja takes place? The Dwar Puja, is that where it takes place?
The Dwar Puja, as far as I'm aware, happens at the entrance of where the Maro is. But this Janwas is more of the area just for where the Dulaha and his family are. So the puja doesn't happen there. It happens to the entrance of the Maro where the wedding is actually going to take place.
Right, so now we move on to our Trinidad Bhojpuri phrase or expression. Short people problem. GHANGREE-ANGREE BHUIYAA mein GHISRAALAA. And GHISRAALAA seemed to be a new word for some of our participants. GHANGREE, they kind of figured out. So let's work it out, Vinay. GHANGREE-ANGREE BHUIYAA mein GHISRAALAA.
Yeah, so GHANGREE-ANGREE, a lot of people know that Ghangree is the long skirt that, a lot of the elder people would wear. I think some people nowadays would call it a lenga. So as you know, a lenga that you get, it's a long skirt. Typically goes all the way to the ground and sometimes can drag on the floor. So the Ghangree is that long skirt. GHANGREE-ANGREE in Hindustani, what they usually do is when they're trying to emphasize something, they'll repeat it, but they'll change the first letter. So some people might know Simi Dimi, some people might know Pani Wani, but in this case, GHANGREE-ANGREE, it's just a play on the word Ghangree. So Angree doesn't itself have a meaning. You're just using the word for repetition there. So GHANGREE-ANGREE, the long skirt. BHUIYAA mein. So BHUIYAA is the word for either the ground or the floor. And some people might use it for ground, but as we remember, long-time days, it could just be referring to a dirt floor or just the actual earth itself. So BHUIYAA mein is the ground, the floor, the earth on the ground. And you're saying on the ground, and GHISRAALAA means to be dragging. So GHANGREE-ANGREE BHUIYAA mein GHISRAALAA means that your long skirt is dragging on the floor.
There you go. I also heard GHANGREE-ANGREE as your Hungarian thing. So here in Trinidad, and you can actually hear some ladies saying that, hey, your Hungarian thing dragging on your floor.
Yeah, exactly. That's the perfect way to show that change from Hindustani and the effect on the grammar that it continues to have in our local dialect.
So GHANGREE-ANGREE BHUIYAA mein GHISRAALAA. GHISRAALAA, well, there you go. You learn another word for your vocabulary. GHISRAALAA, dragging. You might need a SE7ENTY-EIGHT to help you out with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and another Trinidad Bhojpuri word, OJHAA. OJHAA. Oh boy, this was quite interesting because the feedback, you understand, was so varied, varied interpretation of what exactly is an OJHA. So I had folk doctor, village healer, bush doctor, um, someone who jarres, obia man, and those who messaged in obia man, they, it seems like they were serious about the OJHA being only somebody who deals with Obia or dark magic or Kala Jadoo, which we covered before, someone who deals with the supernatural. So there's a kind of a negative association with the word OJHA. So that's why it's curious for me. What exactly is the OJHA? Who was
Yeah,
the OJHA?
obviously, as time changes, language changes. And so the Ocha seems like people know it, as you mentioned, to be a shaman, a witch doctor, a bush doctor, folk healer. Some people might be familiar with the V.S. Naipaul book, Mystic Masur, where the man is, presenting himself to be a mystic, and he gives all of these folk medicinal practices to people, some that might not work, some that do work, but he's seen as a healer and he's using alternative medicine. So it can be used generally in that way. But if, mentioning the way that people are giving the negative connotation to it, I think there have been many references to back in the day. Indian people lived in villages that were very small and kind of isolated. And so when you would take a baby or someone to get jari or anshe, for example, you take them to get jari by, if they were Hindu, a pandit, or if they were Muslim, an imam. And then sometimes the older ladies would help anshe and all of that. However, you don't really refer to those people as a oja man or oja woman. There seems to be a specific connotation of the oja man being a man who might deal in witchcraft, or a man who might deal in kala, jadoo, black magic, some practices that were not native to East Indian culture. Somebody who practices black magic, as opposed to somebody who just jares or anches or gives you folk medicine and stuff like that.
Well, let's check in with Dr. Visham Pimal of Caribbean Hindustani for his perspective on the word OJHA.
So essentially, an OJHA would be the individual who, I think we did the expression before, jare puke, which are panditas. From a medical doctor's perspective, you also have the spiritual element of ailments. So the OJHA was the specific person. Everybody knows that a pandit would puke jare puke, but a OJHA also does it from the chamara caste. So if I were to define it, I'll say the folk doctor from the Caribbean Hindustani perspective.
Well, on to something very pleasant, and that is our food-related word naram, and we use it in the context of roti because we had gol roti. So I think everybody should aspire to have naram roti.
Very num num.
Some of us still working on that. So soft roti was our general feedback.
Yes, exactly. So the hope is that you have gol naram roti, right? Roti that is both very round and roti that is very soft. So I really enjoyed the answers, people replying, and a lot of people I noticed replied soft roti, so they gave like the added emphasis. So they said
Soft and tasty.
Yeah. So
Yeah, just rub it in.
yeah. I like that people gave that extra emphasis there. So yeah, naram is just the Hindustani word for soft.
There you go. So all these words to describe roti. How do you say really bad at roti?
You suck.
Really bad at roti?
Like you're really bad at making roti. Or roti that's not so perfect.
I guess you could say kharab roti, which is just bad roti.
It had to start with a K.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that was another week of Trinidad Bhojpuri words and phrase, and of course, our Kaise Bole Hindustani Mein feature. Thank you very much for keeping up with us. We have another week of words for you. And if you'd like to get in touch with Vinay of the Cutlass magazine, here's how you do so.
Yes, you could follow me at Cutlass Magazine on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, or you could send me a sandesh or a message at cutlasspodcast@gmail.com.
Right, so until next week,